Hi guys. Hopefully everyone read through the chapters from the last video and could see the true miracle of how 12 apostles, newly trained, could go out into a crowd of 5,000 Jews and maybe some pagans and be able to have some success with Jesus' bread and fish, giving them the word of a new way and bread that leads to everlasting life, and a little bit of spiritual understanding, the two little fish. I doubt 12 of us would experience that kind of miracle if we were standing in the midst of 5,000 people today. And if you looked up the story of the miraculous catch that we looked at in Luke last time, you'll see those sketchy scenes in the Gospels of Mark for the sleeping church and Matthew for the Jews. But there is no miraculous catch for those two groups, only in Luke for the children of the light, because the fish is about the deeper spiritual knowledge, things that only the children of the light will ever really understand. In Mark, you can see that this scene is the 16th verse of his gospel, and John the Baptist is already in prison by the 14th verse. At times, Mark's gospel seems so sketchy, but isn't that typical of the sleeping church? Perhaps I'm much like Paul from the passage I read last time. I too have my doubts about the sleeping church at this point. They are all much like those 4 named apostles in the boat in the end. All of them just fishing in the darkness at the end of days, with no idea about the deep spiritual teachings of Jesus, and not even able to recognize him. They didn't even know who Jesus was when they were all dining with him, as he had kindled a fire for all of them, and tried to feed them with a little of his bread and fish he already had waiting for them. I was listening to about an hour-long teaching of Chuck Missler that he did on that chapter, and I need to listen to it again. But he did a pretty good job of analyzing John chapter 21 and doing Greek word studies. There is some good info in his lecture if you want to track it down and listen to it. Even though he never quite grasped what the parable was really about, he at least did get that the 2 unnamed apostles are Andrew and Philip, the 2 Greeks in the bunch. So, before we get back to the parables and the Gospels, I think today I will mostly be showing stellarium stuff. It's usually pretty cut and dried, and interesting things to see on God's clock in the heavens. And we've got these 2 blood moons just around the corner. Blood moons are not as common as some might think, because they have to be total lunar eclipses. When we have just a partial lunar eclipse, it isn't that noticeable, unless the Earth is casting a really large shadow over the moon, and the moon would dim a bit. So, we already had 1 blood moon this year that I found amazing, because from where I'm at, it happened at about 1 minute to midnight on the 3/13 date, which is a date and numbers that keep showing up all over the place. It was also the start of Purim for the Jews this year. Purim is a story from the book of Esther, when the Jews were allowed to slaughter all their enemies by order of her husband, the king. And from what I've got so far on my timeline, That blood moon was also the finish line of the race of the 1600 furlongs from the last verse of Revelation chapter 14. The discussion of the furlongs and these races in the Bible that is translated as furlongs in Revelation, but translated as a race in Paul's writings. That will all have to wait until the next video, because all that could be a video within itself. It might be a good video to start really marking out my timeline on my channel too. I know I've been posting a lot of numbers and dates lately, on my wall and at Patreon and in my videos so far. Perhaps I'm giving my most interested group a chance to take some notes and start discovering things on their own. It's always funner and more mind-bending to be able to come to the knowledge of things by yourself. It's why I drop info in my vids without too much explanation, because I want others to be able to ponder over things before getting another interpretation. And seeing these 313 numbers everywhere, it gets overwhelming. I mean, even down to the date that the planet Uranus was discovered. And Uranus, or Uranus, is Greek for heaven. And they claim it was discovered on 313. And we already know that from the Bible in Luke, when he tells us about Anna in the temple, that it is describing the planet Uranus and her cycles. Uranus, or heaven, is Anna, who departs not from God's temple. And it takes 84 years for her to make the complete 360-degree orbit around the track of the ecliptic in the heavens. And she spends approximately 7 years in each constellation. Since I feel that every word and nuance carries some deeper knowledge in the Bible, I believe that Luke is telling the children of the light to watch for a sign from Uranus to know when the story really gets started. He even writes that she spake of Jesus to all of them that looked for redemption in Jerusalem. The planets and all that is happening in the heavens are also considered God's messengers and prophets for us. Jesus told us also to watch for the signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, because God is always using the heavens to speak to us. It is the universal language of God's clock and stories in the heavens from Psalm 19. I think most already know Psalm 19, but for those who don't, I'll just read the first few verses here. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Also, whenever I'm pointing out scriptures, even though you might think you've heard it 1,000 times and already know it all, just take notes and go back and read the whole chapter. Sometimes something might just be waiting to jump out at you into understanding so deep that you can't even put it into words. Never stop studying. That's what we are all here for right now. So, the last blood moon that we just had on 3/13 of 2025 was the first one that we've had since Anna's blood moon back on November 8th of 2022. and I'll go over it all again later about why that one is called Anna's blood moon. It has to do with the fact that it was occulting the planet Uranus, or heaven, during that blood moon. This is from the Time and Date website. In 2022, we had 2 total lunar eclipses, blood moons. The last one was on November 8th, 2022, and the only one in U.S. history to happen on November 8th, Election Day, too. In 2023 and 2024, we didn't have a blood moon. Not until this year, which, like I said, happened right around the stroke of midnight of 3/13. And now we have 2 more coming right up. While we are here, I might as well go all the way back to 2013, so you can see what all the blood moon dates looked like, and which years we had no total lunar eclipses. It's kind of important to the whole story when we get there, because we had those blood moon tetrads in 2014 and 2015 on the Jewish feast days of the spring and fall those years. And no blood moons in 2012 either, and none for 2013. Then we had the 4 in a row, which were the famous tetrads, and an ominous sign for the Jews. So we had no blood moons for 2 years before that and after that. In a way, it is about a woman in travail, if you understand what those bloody moons are symbolic of. And this is also tied to the whole story of the Revelation 12 signs in the heavens. It's more of a story in the heavens than just one night when the Rev 12 sign happened. But I'll get to it later. So these 2 blood moons that are just ahead of us, this is what it's going to look like. On September 7th, we will have a blood moon that is happening just as the moon is going through those waters of Aquarius. I looked up the Jerusalem time so I could get the exact time, and was surprised to see it at maximum at 9:11 p.m. because that is the date on our calendars when Jesus would have been born, on 9/11 of 3 BC. So I checked it out in Stellarium from Jerusalem, and the moon will have just passed through the waters of Aquarius when the eclipse happens. I've targeted the moon here in Stellarium, so hopefully you can see it. Stellarium has turned the moon sort of red. So to those who like astronomy, it's fun to know that September 7th is the date when it is possible to have a full moon in the waters of Aquarius. And this coming September 7th, we will be having a blood moon only hours after the moon, which represents Israel, passes through those waters, which can be symbolic of a baptism of sorts. Whether it is a baptism in God's Word, or whether wrath raining down, who knows? Israel, 100% full in the waters and turning to blood. I'm feeling that it is not a good sign. I'll back it up a few hours so you can see that around 5 p.m. the moon is just passing through the waters, and it is 100% full. The moon moves fairly quickly around the ecliptic and goes through the waters about once a month. So I'm not sure what the statistics are of having a blood moon on September 7th. when it would be going through those waters as 100% full moon. Anyway, I'll flip to the other side of the ecliptic so we can see where the sun will be on God's clock during the time of that blood moon. I've still got the locale set to Jerusalem, and the timestamp is still the same, September 7th at 9:11 p.m. Now, this is an interesting lineup. Take note that the sun is around that hind foot of Leo in the stellarium artwork here. We've got both the sun and his messenger Mercury in Leo for the blood moon. And look, we've got Mars, the god of war, right in the hand of Virgo, while the moon, Israel, is having some sort of baptism and turning to blood. Pretty spooky. And we've got Venus, the church, safely tucked into the sheepfold that is known as Cancer, the crab. And we've got Jupiter, the king planet, sitting in the Gemini twin that represents immortality. Oh, it gets even better. So I fast forwarded to look at the next blood moon, the one that is coming early next year. When I clicked over to time and date, it was showing me that from my location, which is the West Coast, the blood moon on 3/3 will be at maximum eclipse at 3:33. 3/3 at 3:33. Now that's crazy. So check out these stellarium shots. At first I was like, okay, wow, that blood moon next year is going to be happening in just about the same place that the sun will be for this September blood moon. The sun and the moon are playing the switcheroo again. So if I put the last two pics side by side, you can see what I mean. They aren't exactly the same spot, but pretty close. During the first blood moon on September 7th, in a few weeks, the sun will be around that back foot of Leo. And the second blood moon on March 3rd, the moon will be turning to blood at that back foot of Leo. Looks like Leo might be trampling some grapes. Now, let's see where the sun is going to be during our second blood moon, coming up on 3/3 at 3:33. And again, we've got quite a crowd hanging out with the sun. As many of you probably already know, that each year the sun passes through the waters of Aquarius, depending on your time zones, on March 2nd. So on March 3rd, the sun has just gone through the waters. And this is the night we will have the blood moon, on 3/3 at 3:33, beneath the foot of Leo. And we've got a crowd here. Neptune and Saturn, Venus, Mercury, and Mars, all hanging fairly close to the sun during that bloody moon in Leo. I'll have to admit that I'm still 100% with St. Malachi's 800-year-old prophecy of the popes and how it all played out. And it does make me on edge that we've got a pope right now calling himself Leo. Since my last vids, or my first few vids in my new series here, I've been talking about the feeding of the multitudes in the Bible and what those scenes are really about. The feeding of the 5,000 and then the feeding of the 4,000. And you'll see at the top of this pic, it is the 4,000 day count. This day when Israel was celebrating turning 71 back in 2019 is the date of the second feeding of the multitude of the 4,000. The feeding of the 4,000 only appears in the Gospel of the Sleeping Church and the gospel for the Jews. It's the 4,000 day count to the second coming on Resurrection Sunday of 2030. And in Luke, for the children of the light, they don't need a second feeding of Jesus' bread and fish. They just go straight to the Mount of Transfiguration immediately after the first feeding of the 5,000. The second feeding is also not in the Gospel of John. In a way, the Gospels of Luke and John are written for the children of the light. Oh, about the switcheroos. Another key thing to keep in mind is that the last time I really noted an important switcheroo between the sun and the moon was for Anna's blood moon, which happened near the hind foot of Aries. Hopefully you can see the small pics I have here. The ones on the right side are of the May 8th date in 2019, and then Anna's blood moon 42 months later. And you can see the switcheroo with the sun at the hind foot of Aries. And then the blood moon at the hind foot of Aries. This whole incident of these pics I'm showing here is kind of a long story that I've tried to explain many times, but I'll do it all again soon. But if you can see this collage thing I've got going here, at sundown on May 8th of 2019, Israel started celebrating their 71st birthday. It was Israel's Independence Day on their calendars, and they celebrated through May 9th. Well, exactly 42 months later, we had Anna's blood moon, which occulted Uranus, heaven, during the blood moon. And if you can see the pic at the bottom left, that is where the sun was when Jesus was resurrected and met with the apostles in the upper room in 30 AD. At some point in my videos, I'll talk more about the Earth's precession that you are seeing in this pic here. But for now, I'll just say that this is what I mean when I say something like Jesus' current birth date, which is October 7th. Look at the two pics of Virgo's arm at the upper left. They look identical, right? One is showing where the sun was on 9/11 of 3 BC, the day Jesus was born. And the other is showing over 2,000 years later, where the sun is on October 7th, during our current times. It's the same star date as 9/11 back in Jesus' time. It is a star date on God's clock. As you can see, the sun is in the same spot on the clock in these two pics. And everyone knows the significance now of October 7th, when Israel was attacked. Funny how people were saying that it was Israel's 9/11. Yeah, Jesus' birth date, any way you look at it. It's the same star date. A star date is where our star is at any given time in the heavens. And the sun will pretty much be in the same place each year on the same date throughout your lifetime. However, due to the backdrop of stars slowly moving over time, when we are talking about long periods of time, like 2,000 years, it will be a different date on our calendars. I think it's a shift of 26 days right now on our Gregorian calendars. And the side-by-side pics on the right, that is the star date of both John the Baptist's birth and the third great American eclipse. It's the same star date, 313 of 3 BC, and April 8th on our current calendars. Again, the sun is in the exact same position on God's clock on those dates. So these three great American eclipses, when God left his marks across the earth that people all over the world know about, really were great markers in time and warnings of things to come. For me, it was the second eclipse that really blew my mind. These again are side-by-side pics that are nearly identical. What's crazy is we even have Mercury, the messenger, in nearly the exact same spot as well. These pics are over 2,000 years apart in time, yet marking such major events. The one on the left is 918 of 3 BC, and I just set the time for 9:18 a.m. because it sounds like a good time for Jesus to be presented at the temple for the first time ever, when he was taken to get circumcised and named. The near identical pic on the right is the second great American eclipse, which happened on the Sabbath following the attack on Israel. It was October 14th of 2023. And when I looked up the stats on our second solar eclipse, it said that the mark of the shadow first touched the U.S. at 9:18 a.m. That's just too much. I keep seeing these totally impossible things that only God could do. And now we have this blood moon coming up on September 7th at 9:11 p.m. over Jerusalem. And then the next one, when I saw from my location, is going to be on 3/3 at 3:33 a.m. So anyway, back in 2022, Anna's blood moon was 33 days after Jesus' current birth date of October 7th, and it was the longest blood moon in 33 years. And then 333 days later, Israel was attacked, again on Jesus' current birth date of October 7th. So with all these 33s that keep coming up, I was surprised when I saw that Leo's blood moon next year is on 3/3 at 3:33 in Leo. And if we are talking about this May 8th date, when the Jews were celebrating turning 71, and it being the 4,000 day count to the second coming, that is the date, May 8th, that Pope Leo was installed this year too. All this stuff is happening on very key dates. It seems that Pope Leo might be looking at a 300-day count from the date he was installed on May 8th until his blood moon next year. 300 days. There are a lot of 300 references in the Bible. The one that keeps sticking with me is Gideon's story in Judges, chapter 6 and 7. But I haven't totally made up my mind over that one. Gideon's job was to throw down idolatry in the country. He followed the angel's command. In a nutshell, after that, the Lord was helping Gideon with choosing his army. He told Gideon to take the men down to the water where he would try them or prove them, like a test that he often does. The waters in the Bible usually represent knowledge, and in particular, the knowledge of God. It's why the men often find their wives at the wells. The rivers are the first thing named in the Bible. Knowledge flows like rivers throughout the lands to water the land and bring life. John called Jesus the living waters. So back to Gideon. Gideon was told to set the men aside who lappeth of the water with his tongue, as a dog lappeth. Despite what so many preachers try to tell you, this is not a good thing. It also describes the men who lapped like dogs as putting their hand to their mouth, which could be like dumb dogs that can't bark. That is something that is in Isaiah chapter 56, verse 10. Although here it is not talking so much about soldiers, it is talking about the watchmen and the shepherds who should be tending to God's flock. So Isaiah writes, "His watchmen are blind. They are all ignorant. They are all dumb dogs that cannot bark, sleeping, lying down, loving to slumber. Yea, they are greedy dogs which can never have enough, and they are shepherds that cannot understand. They all look to their own way, every one for his gain from his quarter." So, with God's test to find an army for Gideon, the others are described as bowing down upon their knees to drink water. When you think of the waters as knowledge of the Word of God, then you can probably see the picture here. Some bow down to drink the water, while others lap at the water like dogs. The dogs in the Bible are not a good thing. They are considered unrighteous and not saved. Gentiles were often referred to as dogs too, and no doubt the pagans. So men who lap like dogs at the knowledge of God, I believe God sees them as expendable, and why he told Gideon just to take those 300 men with him to battle. And you can see why I'm wondering if this 300-day count that Pope Leo has right now, from his taking the throne to Leo's blood moon next year, could somehow be connected to the 300 of Gideon's army who simply lapped at the word of God like dogs. I guess we will have to wait and see how this one works out. But his date of May 8th is such a key date on my timeline because of the day Israel turns 71. They are 77 right now. An old barren widow. No doubt this video is a lot to learn, so I'll start marking out my timeline in the next video, and it will also serve as sort of a review of the things we've looked at so far. What I'm hoping to do is show you things in a different light, and perhaps it will help to answer those unanswered questions, like things in the Gospels that are still a puzzle or a hidden thing in the parables, or just odd statements in the information that we are given, such as why at every turn the Pharisees and scribes were hovering over Jesus, always questioning him about what he is doing, such as eating with publicans and sinners, or not following fast days with his disciples, or breaking the Sabbath rules. As the story and parables unfold, you may find hidden secrets, such as why Jesus called Zebedee, who was the father of John and James, thunder. That's what Jesus called him, their father. When Jesus refers to John and James in Mark 3:17 as the sons of thunder. Hopefully soon you'll see that Zebedee had just rocked the temple in Jerusalem, like a major thunderclap. In a way, the storm had arrived. For me, the Gospels have become thrilling and intense, and more shocking and gruesome than I imagined, as God continues to show me more all the time. Hang out and I'll get to it all eventually. Unless, of course, I end up getting raptured out of here soon. Wouldn't that be great? Have a great day. You never know when it could be our last.